Keisha Morgan came to Family Feud to win $20,000. She needed $14,000 of it to keep her house. She needed $3,000 of it to pay the hospital bill from the night her son Jalen stopped breathing in his sleep, and she drove 90 miles an hour to the emergency room in a car with no insurance, because the insurance had lapsed 3 weeks earlier, because she had used that payment to cover the water bill, because the city had sent a final notice with the word disconnection printed in red letters that her 8-year-old daughter Nyla found on the kitchen counter and asked, "Mama, does disconnection mean they take the water away?" And Keisha said, "No, baby, it just means Mama needs to make a phone call," which was a lie. The 47th lie Keisha had told her children that year to keep the architecture of their childhood standing, while the foundation underneath it dissolved, one bill at a time. Keisha scored 162 points on Fast Money. She needed 200. When Steve Harvey read the number, Keisha didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She straightened her back, pressed her hands flat against the podium, looked directly at Steve, and said, "Okay, thank you for the opportunity." And she smiled. A perfect, practiced, airtight smile that fooled everyone in that studio except Steve Harvey, who had seen that exact smile before. Not on a contestant, but in a mirror, 27 years ago, in a gas station bathroom in Cleveland, when he was rehearsing how to look like a man who was fine while sleeping in a car that smelled like failure and trying to figure out how to eat that day. Steve recognized the smile because he had invented it, and when he looked at Keisha Morgan, something behind his eyes shifted, and he set his cards on the podium, which he almost never does, and said, "Keisha, don't leave this stage yet." It was January 14th, 2023, a Saturday, and the Morgan family had driven 11 hours from Meridian, Mississippi to the Atlanta studio. Keisha's team was her sister Danielle, her cousin Rochelle, Rochelle's husband Andre, and Keisha's best friend Tamika, who had taken 2 days off from her job at a nursing home to make the trip, and had paid for the gas with money she didn't really have, because Tamika had known Keisha since they were 9 years old, and could see through every wall Keisha had ever built, and knew that this trip was not about a game show. It was about a woman who had run out of quiet ways to save herself, and needed the universe to intervene, and this was the last intervention Tamika could think of. Nyla and Jalen were not in the audience. They were staying with Keisha's neighbor, Mrs. Tate, in Meridian. Keisha had told them she was going on a work trip. Another lie. The counter was at 48 now. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Keisha Morgan grew up in Meridian, in a house with 4 siblings and a mother who worked double shifts at a poultry processing plant, and a father who was present in the way that some fathers are present. Physically there, but emotionally sealed behind something the children could feel but couldn't name. Keisha was the oldest. She raised her younger siblings the way oldest daughters in large families do, not because anyone asked, but because someone had to, and she was the one who noticed first. She braided hair before school. She heated canned soup on the stove when her mother was working late. She learned to forge her mother's signature on permission slips because her mother was too exhausted to read them, and Keisha didn't want to be the only kid who didn't go on the field trip. She married Darius Morgan at 21. He was a mechanic. He was good, funny, present in the way her father never was. They had Jalen in 2013 and Nyla in 2015. For 4 years, things were stable, not comfortable, stable. Darius made decent money. Keisha worked part-time at a daycare. They rented a small house on 30th Avenue with a yard big enough for Jalen to throw a ball and a kitchen window that let in afternoon light that made Keisha feel, for a few hours each day, like the world was holding her instead of pressing against her. Then Darius was killed. June 9, 2019, a Sunday. He was driving home from a job, a side job, cash work, replacing a transmission for a man he knew from church. And a 17-year-old kid ran a red light on Highway 19 at 58 miles per hour and hit the driver's side of Darius's truck, and Darius was dead before the paramedics arrived. He was 31 years old. Jalen was 6. Nyla was 4. Keisha got the phone call at 7:14 p.m. She was giving Nyla a bath. Nyla was singing a song about a duck. Keisha's phone rang. She answered it. A voice she didn't recognize said words she would never fully remember, in an order that didn't matter, because after the word deceased, the rest was just sound. She put the phone on the bathroom floor. She finished bathing Nyla. She dried her off. She put her in pajamas. She read her a story. She kissed her forehead. She walked into the hallway. She closed the door. And she slid down the wall to the floor and put her hand over her mouth and screamed into her palm without making a sound, because her children were 20 feet away, and they were going to find out their father was dead, and she was going to be the one to tell them, but not tonight. Tonight they were going to sleep, believing everything was fine. She owed them one more night. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. Darius had no life insurance. He had talked about getting a policy. He had printed out quotes from 2 different companies. The printouts were in a folder on top of the refrigerator. Unsigned, undated. 2 pieces of paper that represented $250,000 in coverage that would have changed everything, and instead represented nothing at all. Keisha found the folder 3 days after the funeral. She opened it. She saw the quotes. She saw his handwriting in the margins where he had circled the monthly premium, $47, and written, "After holidays," with a question mark. After holidays. He was going to sign up after the holidays. The accident was in June. Keisha sat at the kitchen table and held those printouts and pressed them against her chest the way a person holds something that was supposed to save them and arrived too late. And she made a sound that Jalen heard from the living room and came running and found his mother doubled over the table and said, "Mama, are you sick?" And Keisha said, "No, baby. Mama's just tired." Lie number 1. The money vanished in stages. First the savings, $2,100, gone in 6 weeks. Then the credit cards, maxed in 4 months. Then the borrowing from Danielle, who had little to give, but gave it. Then the borrowing from Tamika. Then the payday loans. 3 of them, at interest rates that Keisha didn't fully understand until the first repayment notice arrived, and the number was so much larger than what she had borrowed that she thought it was a mistake. It was not a mistake. It was the math of being poor, which is a different kind of math than the kind they teach in school. A kind where the numbers always get bigger and never in your favor. She applied for Social Security survivor benefits. Approved. $1,840 per month for 2 children. The mortgage was $975. The utilities averaged $310. The car payment was $285. Food was $500 if she skipped meals for herself, which she did, every day. Eating what Jalen and Nyla left on their plates, standing at the counter, finishing chicken nuggets and applesauce cups, and telling herself this was temporary. It was not temporary. It was 3.5 years and counting. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. She got a job at a Dollar General 6 months after Darius died. $9.50 an hour. 28 hours a week, because the store didn't offer full-time positions to new employees, and 28 hours meant they didn't have to provide benefits. She applied for Medicaid for the children. Approved. She applied for SNAP benefits. Approved for $387 per month. She applied for TANF. Denied. The letter said her combined income from survivor benefits and part-time employment exceeded the eligibility threshold by $94 per month. $94. She was $94 too rich for government assistance and $94 too poor to survive. And she stood in her kitchen holding that denial letter and laughed. Not bitterly, not angrily. She laughed the way a person laughs when the absurdity of a system becomes so extreme that the only alternative to laughing is something she was not willing to do because her children were in the next room, and she was the only parent they had left. Jalen had asthma. Not mild asthma, the kind that required a nebulizer and a maintenance inhaler and a rescue inhaler, and the maintenance inhaler cost $340 for a 90-day supply with the insurance she had and $480 without it. When the insurance lapsed because she redirected that payment to the water bill, the inhaler became $480, and Keisha started rationing it. She gave Jalen 2 puffs in the morning instead of 4. She told herself it would be fine. It was not fine. On a Tuesday night in October 2022, Jalen stopped breathing in his sleep. Keisha heard the silence. Not a sound. The absence of a sound. The absence of her son's breathing, which she had memorized the way all mothers memorize the rhythm of their children's lungs. A rhythm so constant and so quiet that you don't know you're tracking it until it stops. She ran into his room. He was blue around the lips. She grabbed him. She grabbed the rescue inhaler. She administered 4 puffs. He gasped. He coughed. He breathed. She held him against her chest and rocked him on the floor of his bedroom for 45 minutes. And then she carried him to the car and drove 90 miles an hour to the emergency room in an uninsured vehicle at 2 a.m. because the alternative was staying home and hoping. And she was done hoping. She was done with hope as a strategy. She needed something mechanical. She needed machines and doctors and a system that worked even when the person inside it couldn't afford it. The ER bill was $3,200. She received it 11 days later. She put it in a drawer. She closed the drawer. She didn't open it again. One night, 2 weeks before the Family Feud taping, Nyla was lying in bed and Keisha was tucking her in. And Nyla looked up at her and said, "Mama, are we going to have to leave our house?" Keisha froze. She said, "Why would you think that, baby?" Nyla said, "Because I heard you on the phone saying please a lot. And you only say please a lot when you're scared." Keisha looked at her daughter. 8 years old. 8 years old and already fluent in the language of her mother's fear. Already decoding phone calls and reading tones and mapping the emotional geography of a household that was held together by lies and love and the increasingly thin distance between the two. Keisha said, "We're not leaving our house, baby, I promise." Lie number 49. The foreclosure notice had arrived that morning. And then Keisha said something no one was prepared for. Not that night. On that stage. The game ended. Keisha lost. 162 points. She stood at the podium and smiled that perfect smile and thanked Steve Harvey and started to step back. Steve said, "Keisha, don't leave this stage yet." She stopped. The smile stayed. The armor stayed. Every molecule of her body was arranged in the formation of a woman who was fine. Steve looked at her for a long time. The audience was quiet, but not silent. The transitional quiet between segments. People shifting, coughing, normal sounds. But Steve was not in a normal place. He was somewhere else. He was in a gas station bathroom 27 years ago, looking at a face that was smiling for no one and fooling everyone. He said, "Keisha, how are you doing?" "I'm great, Steve. This was amazing. Thank you so much." "That's not what I asked. I asked how you're doing." The smile flickered. "Not much. A candle in a draft." She said, "I'm blessed, Steve. I really am." Steve nodded slowly. He said, "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need the real answer. Not the one you give your kids, not the one you give your sister, not the one you've been rehearsing since you got here. The real one." The studio fell completely silent. Keisha's smile held for 3 more seconds, then 4, then 5, and on the 6th second, it broke. Not like glass, like a dam. Slowly at first, a crack, a tremor, and then everything behind it came forward at once, and her face collapsed, and her hands went to her eyes, and she bent forward over the podium, and a sound came out of her that Tamika, standing on the family platform, recognized immediately because she had heard it once before, through a phone line, at 2 a.m., on the night Jalen stopped breathing. Danielle ran from the family section. Tamika ran. Rochelle ran. They surrounded Keisha at the podium and held her, and Keisha said, through the sobbing, "I'm so tired. I'm so tired of pretending. I'm so tired of lying to my babies. I can't do it anymore. I can't." Steve stood 3 feet away. He didn't move. He let her break. He let the women around her hold the pieces. He waited. Because Steve Harvey understood something that most people don't, which is that you cannot help a person who is still pretending. And the most important thing he could do in that moment was not comfort her, but let her stop performing. When the sound subsided, when Keisha's breathing slowed, when she lifted her head and her face was destroyed and honest, and finally real, Steve stepped forward. He said, "There she is. There's the real Keisha. Now I can help you." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the audience. "I need every person in this room to look at this woman. Look at her face. That face is in your office. That face is at your church. That face is at the school pickup line. That face is the woman who always says, 'I'm blessed,' when you ask how she's doing. And she is drowning. She has been drowning for 3 years, and nobody noticed because she smiles too well." He turned back to Keisha. "I know about the house. I know about Jalen's inhaler. I know about the insurance. And I know about the drawer where you put the hospital bill and never opened it." Keisha stared at him. "How do you know all that?" Steve looked at Tamika. Tamika looked at Keisha with a face full of guilt and love, and the specific defiance of a woman who had decided that keeping her best friend's secrets was no longer more important than keeping her best friend alive. Steve said, "Because the people who love you were not willing to watch you disappear." But Steve wasn't done. He said, "Keisha, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from a man who knows exactly what that smile costs." He paused. "An old man at a gas station once told me, 'God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' I was living in my car. I was eating out of gas station trash cans. And I had the same smile you have, the one that works on everyone, the one that keeps people from asking questions, the one that costs you everything, because maintaining it takes more energy than the actual suffering." He looked at her. "That old man didn't save me because he gave me wise words. He saved me because he saw through the smile. And today, Keisha, I'm the old man, and I see you." Keisha covered her mouth with both hands. Danielle was crying so hard she had to sit down on the stage floor. Tamika was holding Keisha from behind, her forehead pressed against Keisha's shoulder, Her eyes closed. Steve reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope. "This is a check for $50,000. Keisha shook her head. She shook her head the way people shake their heads when something too large enters a space too small, and the body doesn't know how to process it, so it defaults to refusal. "Steve, no, that's too much. I just came here to play a game. I didn't come here for charity. I'm not a charity case." Steve said, "You're right. You're not a charity case. You're a woman who buried her husband, lost her income, rationed her son's inhaler, fed her children before herself every single day, and lied 49 times to protect 2 kids who think their mother isn't scared. That's not charity. That's war. And soldiers don't get charity. They get reinforcements. This is a reinforcement." Keisha took the envelope. She held it against her chest the way she had held the unsigned insurance printouts 3 years earlier. Except this time, the paper in her hands was not too late. This time, it was exactly on time. But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his phone. On stage. He called Dr. Anita Simmons, a pulmonologist at Children's Hospital of Mississippi in Jackson. He said, "Dr. Simmons, my name is Steve Harvey. I have a 6-year-old boy named Jalen Morgan in Meridian who has severe asthma and whose mother has been rationing his inhaler because she can't afford the full prescription. I am personally covering a full year of his medication, his nebulizer supplies, and quarterly specialist visits. I need your office to contact his mother this week." Dr. Simmons said, "We'll call her Monday morning." Keisha's knees gave out. Tamika caught her. Danielle caught her. They lowered her to the stage and held her, and Keisha said, "My baby can breathe. My baby can breathe." And she said it over and over like a prayer that had finally been answered after being spoken into empty rooms for 3 years. But Steve wasn't done. He looked at the audience and said, "One more thing." He turned to his producer. The producer nodded. Steve said, "Keisha, the show doesn't do this. This has never been done. But I spoke to the producers before the taping, and I told them what I was going to do, and I told them they could either support it or find a new host." He paused. "Your mortgage is $975 a month. Your home is in foreclosure. As of today, your mortgage is paid in full for the next 3 years. That's from the Steve Harvey Foundation. You're not leaving that house. Nyla was right. You're staying." Keisha went down, all the way to the floor. Not her knees, her whole body. She lay flat on the Family Feud stage with her hands over her face and her chest heaving. And Tamika lay beside her and held her hand. And Danielle lay on the other side. And the 3 of them lay on that stage like women who had been standing for too long and finally had permission to be horizontal. Steve looked at the competing family, the Nakamura family from Sacramento. Mrs. Nakamura was holding her teenage daughter, and both of them were crying. Mr. Nakamura, an electrician who worked 2 jobs himself, was standing very still with his fist pressed against his mouth. Steve walked over and said, "You came here to compete. But I think you understand that what happened today is bigger than competition." He handed the Nakamura family a check for $20,000, and Mr. Nakamura bowed deeply and said, "My mother was a single mother. She would have wanted me to see this." Steve bowed back. Steve walked to the front of the stage and looked directly into the camera. "Everyone watching at home, there is a woman in your life right now who is smiling too well. She says she's blessed. She says she's fine. She says she doesn't need anything. She is lying. Not because she's dishonest, because she's exhausted. Because asking for help feels like failing, and she has decided she would rather drown quietly than admit she can't swim. I need you to stop asking her how she's doing. She'll lie. She's good at it. She's been practicing for years. Instead, I need you to show up. Pay a bill. Fill a tank. Stock a refrigerator. Take her children for an afternoon so she can sit in her own house alone and breathe for the first time in months. Don't ask. Just do. Because the women who hold everything together are the ones who fall apart in silence. And silence is where people disappear. The episode aired on February 12, 2023. Within 36 hours, the clip of Steve saying, "There she is, there's the real Keisha," had been viewed 438 million times. The hashtag, #TheRealKeisha, trended in 68 countries for 18 consecutive days. The clip of Keisha lying on the stage while Tamika and Danielle held her became the most shared image in Family Feud history. Domestic assistance organizations reported a 490% increase in anonymous grocery and bill payments in the 6 weeks following the broadcast. The National Alliance for Single-Parent Families cited the episode as the most significant media event in the organization's 20-year history. Steve Harvey and Keisha Morgan established the Smile That Costs Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to identifying and supporting single mothers masking financial and emotional crisis behind performed wellness. The foundation's flagship program trained community volunteers to recognize signs of hidden struggle in single-parent households and provide direct, anonymous assistance. Within 2 years, the foundation raised $28.1 million and served over 6,300 families. A second program, designed with input from Tamika, who joined the foundation's board, provided peer support networks pairing single mothers with other single mothers who had navigated similar crises. The program's guiding principle was a single sentence Tamika had said to a reporter after the episode aired. "You can't save someone you can't see, and the ones who need saving the most are the ones who've gotten best at being invisible." Jalen's inhaler arrived on a Monday. Full prescription, 90-day supply, no rationing. Keisha sat at the kitchen table and held the box in her hands and stared at it, and Jalen walked in and said, "Is that my medicine, Mama?" And Keisha said, "Yes, baby, all of it, every puff, no more counting." Jalen said, "I don't have to count anymore?" And Keisha shook her head, and Jalen smiled, a real smile, the kind of smile that only happens when a child discovers that a thing he thought was permanent was actually temporary, and the temporary thing just ended. Keisha did not lose the house. She received the mortgage confirmation letter on a Thursday. She sat on the front porch and read it twice. Then she walked inside and opened the kitchen drawer where the hospital bill had been sitting unopened for 4 months. She opened it. She read the number. She wrote a check from the money Steve had given her. She put it in an envelope. She sealed it. She mailed it. And then she opened every other drawer in the kitchen, one by one, and pulled out every bill, every notice, every letter with red printing and threatening language and final warnings. And she spread them all across the kitchen table and she paid them, every single one by one, in order, until the table was empty and the drawers were empty, and the weight that had been living inside the furniture of her home was gone. In 2024, Nyla came home from school with a drawing. It was a picture of a house. Their house. Yellow walls, red door, a sun in the corner, 2 stick figures standing in front of it, one tall, one small. Nyla handed it to Keisha and said, "That's us, in our house, staying." Keisha hung it on the refrigerator. It's still there. In a 2024 interview with Tamron Hall, Steve Harvey was asked why he pushed Keisha past her smile. why he didn't just accept the performance the way everyone else in her life had. Steve was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to die behind a smile. I did it for years. I smiled while I was homeless. I smiled while I was starving. I smiled so well that nobody checked on me. And the truth is, I almost didn't make it. Because the better you smile, the lonelier you get. And loneliness doesn't kill you all at once. It kills you one lie at a time. I pushed Keisha because somebody should have pushed me, and nobody did. And I promised myself that if I ever saw that smile on someone else's face, I wouldn't look away. I'd walk toward it. Because walking toward the smile is the only way to find the person hiding behind it. Today there is a kitchen drawer in a small house on 30th Avenue in Meridian, Mississippi. It is empty. It has been empty for over a year. Keisha opens it sometimes, not to look for anything, just to confirm that it's still empty. She runs her hand along the bottom of the drawer and feels the smooth wood and the absence of paper and the absence of envelopes with red printing and the absence of numbers that used to keep her awake. And she closes the drawer and stands in her kitchen in the afternoon light from that window, the same light that used to make her feel held, and she lets it hold her again. Not because everything is perfect, because the drawer is empty, because Jalen can breathe, because Nyla drew a house with 2 people staying, because a woman named Tamika refused to let her disappear, because a man on a television stage looked at a perfect smile and said, "That's not what I asked." Some people come to a game show to win money. Some people come to win applause, or a memory, or a story to tell at Thanksgiving. And some people come because they have nowhere else to go. Because every system has failed, and every drawer is full, and every smile costs more than the last one. And they are standing on the edge of a cliff, disguised as a stage, hoping that someone, anyone, will see past the performance and ask the real question. Keisha Morgan did not leave Family Feud with $20,000. She left with an empty drawer, a full inhaler, a house that belongs to her, and the terrifying, liberating, bone-deep relief of being seen. And sometimes being seen is worth more than any check, because checks pay bills. But being seen pays for the thing bills can't touch, which is the distance between who you're pretending to be and who you actually are. And that distance, when it finally closes, is the most expensive thing in the world, and the most free. If that story just cracked you open in a place you didn't know was sealed, subscribe right now. Every single week, we bring you the Family Feud moments that change the way you see the person standing next to you. The next one drops in 7 days, and I need you there for it. Tap that notification bell. This channel isn't slowing down.